Regarding Men with Janice Fiamingo, Paul Elam, and Tom Golden. Episode 8, False Accusations.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I am Paul Elam with a Voice for Men, coming to you from Southwest Virginia, where you can smell the Trump support in the Walmart store, at least according to Peter Strzok. Joining me today is Tom Golden from Men Are Good, also of the East Coast variety of individual. And we're also joined by Janice Fiamingo of the great frozen hinterlands of the North. Glad to see you guys today.
It's good to be here.
Good to be here.
And today we're going to be talking about false accusations of sexual abuse, of rape, sexual crimes. We're going to do this talking about, as a centerpiece anyway, the Vladek Filler case, which just finally, after 12 years of hell for Vladek Filler, concluded. Starting in 2007, when during a contested acrimonious divorce, his wife, Ligia Argueta, filed a complaint against him with the Goldsboro Police Department in Maine for sexual assault. This started I can only say, an epic odyssey for this man, lasting 12 years. He was convicted once of the sexual assault. That was overturned because of prosecutorial misconduct, withholding of exculpatory evidence by prosecutor Mary Kellett, of infamous notoriety in this case. He was later prosecuted for assault, simple assault. And mind you, the simple assault and stuff like that came up years into the case, after Ligia was exposed as a fraud, after Mary Kellett was exposed as a corrupt prosecutor. They continued to persecute this man, finally got him in jail for 21 days on a simple assault charge because he allegedly threw some water on his former wife. He was finally completely and totally exonerated of all charges. He had the assault charge, for which he served 21 days in jail, overturned. The rape conviction was overturned. He was completely, more or less declared innocent by a federal judge in Texas recently, just in the past week or so, and was awarded $1.76 million judgment against a nurse in the case, Linda Gleason, who worked with his ex-wife to concoct the lies, coached her all the way through it, told her when to cry, told her what charges to make. You can read below. There is a great synopsis in the ruling of what happened, and we are giving you the original document on that, or a scanned copy of it anyway. You can read for yourself what happened to this guy over a period of 12 years, what he had to go through. Mary Kellett ended up being the first prosecutor in the history of the state of Maine to have her law license suspended for prosecutorial misconduct. But unfortunately, because the system being the system, she was back practicing law after a very short suspension. I forget how long it was, 30 days, something like that. She was, relieved of duties in the prosecutor's office, and I'm sure she's doing well in some strip mall somewhere. Practicing law next to the 7-Eleven convenience store. But she is still a lawyer, unfortunately, where she should not be. She should be in jail.
Really?
For what she did. But that fairly much sums up the case. If you want to know more about it, you can read below. At this point, I'm going to ask Tom and Janice for any commentary they have on the case. And then we want to talk a little bit more about the impact of false accusations, generally speaking, on individuals that it happens to, which is a lot of people.
Well, I mean, I'll say just that thinking about Mary Kellett, I wondered whether there had been any talk after her prosecutorial misconduct had come out, whether there had been any talk about reviewing the many, many other cases that she had prosecuted. Do you know anything about that, Paul? Because it seemed pretty clear, and I'm not an expert on this case by any means, but it seemed pretty clear from what I read about her that she is pure and simple a man-hating feminist ideologue who had decided early on at some point in her career that she would convict as many men as possible using as many, underhanded means as possible, because she believes that all men, whether they're actually specifically guilty or not, or whether there's any evidence against them in a particular case, are guilty in some way, and that it's better for women to have as many men in jail as possible. And so it certainly does raise the question of how many other men were wrongly convicted.
There were more complaints filed with the Bar Association. And I can also tell you that the Bar Association in Maine was not interested. They didn't care.
No, I mean, this is a scary thing. This is a situation we're at now where after 30 years of feminist activism, concerted feminist activism to get feminists into these positions in law, in social work, in academia, in journalism, where their primary stated purpose, they don't even try to hide it, is to do feminist activism from a position of believing that men abuse women, period, and that they'll be doing a good deed for humanity by harming as many men as possible. And they're everywhere. It makes me think, I was saying this to Tom before we started, Tom has an excellent essay in Sons of Feminism talking about a particular case in the Maryland Department of Health where it was clear that various feminist ideologues worked in concert, or even just sort of unconsciously perhaps, to hide evidence of harms to men, and out of a belief that harms to men simply don't matter, and that it somehow hurts the feminist position for society in general to be aware that men suffer. And Tom's point was that this is one case of one small department where we see that, and multiply this all across North America and in other parts of the Western world too, where feminism has had an impact. And this is what feminists are doing out of animus to men, and it's terrifying. We allowed it to happen. I don't know how it could ever have really, I don't know how it could have been prevented really. And now we have feminists in all of these positions whose primary goal is actually to harm men, which they see as a kind of good for society. I just find it terrifying.
And very few places are easier to harm men than in the area of sexual assault and rape. It's just an easy piece. And Vladek Filler is my hero, man. The guy was just incredible in what he did. And at 12 years, and I'd love to get him to write a how-to book, that helps men understand, okay, if you get falsely accused, here's what you do here, here, and here, because man, the false accusation throws people into chaos. Yeah. And it's really hard when you're falsely accused to be able to pull it together and fight a law case. I mean, it's just almost impossible. So my hat is off to Vladek, and I hope maybe someday we can have him on here with us.
My hat's off to him too, and my sympathies go out to the men this happens to, because as you said, Tom, this is it's a slam dunk. It's to be able to accuse a man of sexual assault. One, because of gynocentrism, the society, even the man's family, in many cases, will automatically believe the accusation with no evidence, nothing more than the pointed finger.
Yes.
The criminal justice system will believe, and we even have feminists out there chanting, "Believe the woman." And this is like religious dogma. It's a horrible thing. And then comes the crushing power of society. One of the cases that we have at registerher.com, .org, is that a man was accused of rape falsely. He killed himself, and then his mother could not bear the grief, and a year later, she killed herself. And this happens over and over. If you Google this, you will find one case after another of men falsely accused, not just guys accused, but men falsely accused, killing themselves because they could not handle the social, legal political, all kinds of pressure that comes with. One of the suicide victims was a police officer
Yeah.
who was accused of rape.
And why is it so critical to men? Why does it push them to take their own lives? And I'll answer my own question, because men are hierarchical. We live in a hierarchical world, and false accusations is a wrecking ball for hierarchy. It just tears things apart. Your status drops so far down, so fast that it's completely unbelievable. You can't believe that it actually happened. And, so men are in this position of their value of themselves is based on, a lot of times, their status in the culture and in their community and in their relationships. And this is really a way to disintegrate that status very quickly. And that leaves men feeling like they have nothing left, Then to make it worse, we're all based on the computer versus chooser. I don't know if you guys know about that dichotomy, but most mammals have a computer chooser thing where the chooser is the one who has the babies and takes care of the kids, and the computer competes for their activity in order to get them to be their mate. And so in our culture, basically men are the competers, although it's gray in many areas, and women are the choosers. And when someone is the chooser, they are responsible to say when the competers are cheating. So it's almost expected that, women will, they're going to be the ones that will tell us when so-and-so's cheating. Whereas men, if a man points out something a woman did, people don't even listen, because he's not ordained by our biology to say, they're cheating. No, it doesn't matter. He's a competer. He's not a chooser. So that's another thing that kind of throws a monkey wrench into this whole deal, is that biologically we are geared differently. The men are geared to compete and the women are geared to choose. And this choice plays into this false accusation thing.
As does our role as protector and provider.
Right.
We are not supposed to complain about any amount of pain, any amount of hardship, any amount of distress. Any complaints we make about those things lower us in that hierarchy. Because we are seen as weak and inferior. And so we have men stuffing this. Then you have the feminist establishment that comes along and says, well, men don't share their feelings. And when they do share their feelings, women, these same feminists say, you whining crybaby.
Yep, that's it.
There's this loop you can't get out of as a male
exactly right.
culture. And this is what happens to the victims of false accusation. And now I know for certain that in any discussion of this, there will always be a feminist who comes into the crowd and says that does the 2% thing. Only 2% of false allegations or 2% of allegations are false. And we quote some really obscure FBI thing about that. First of all, I can't imagine myself giving a damn about anything less than the actual percentage.
Yes.
That's no comfort. If it's 2% of 100,000 rapes, that's a lot of men at risk for suicide and at risk for prison.
Yes.
And definitely with their lives destroyed.
Yes.
That's a great, but it is more than 2%. I'm going to link you to a video by Michelle Malkin below.
Good.
Where she expertly dissects that zombie statistic.
Yeah.
It's 2%, excuse me, of allegations being false. It's more in the 40 to 50% range, maybe.
Right. But Paul, the feminists now have dropped the 2% idea.
Oh, have they?
Yes. Now it's 0% because you are to believe the woman.
Well, there's that.
I mean, it's gone from 2% to 0%. Believe the woman at all costs.
Well, I do. I believe Michelle Malkin.
Yeah, there you go. But I mean, it's just unbelievable. They've literally gone from 2% to 0.
Yeah. Well, the academic mantra for dealing with allegations of sexual assault and sexual harassment is start by believing. So the idea is that you don't necessarily believe entirely, but you start that way, and only if incontrovertible evidence comes forward proving that the woman is lying or mistaken. And only in those cases do you then stop believing. So yeah, I mean, I've seen 2 to 8%
Right.
bandied about quite often, with the implication that if it were in that range, that's very tiny. And this is supposed to be about, equivalent to other kinds of reporting of crime. For one thing, of course, the reporting of sexual harassment or sexual assault is an entirely different sort of crime. There's all sorts of obvious reasons why a woman might falsely report, far beyond the reasons why one would falsely report one's car having been stolen. Completely different sort of case. But even if it were, as you say, Paul, even if it were as low as 2% or as low as 8%, that's not low at all.
Right.
It's a staggering figure. And of course, the thing that feminists never say is that even if we believe the study that found it was between 2 and 8%, that's cases where it's proven the accusation was false. And we know that in most cases, it's impossible to prove that it was false. Many, many cases end up being classified as unfounded. Feminists are now actually working quite hard to have that category taken out of police files. They want the cases that don't go to trial to be reclassified, but that's a whole other story. But that's in the 40 to 60% range, where there simply isn't enough evidence to determine. But the police do not therefore say that is a false accusation. We don't know how many of those unfounded cases are actually false, but it would be utterly foolish and pie in the sky to imagine that none of them are. So it's an out and out lie by feminist organizations. And it's so, I mean, this is, I get so upset about this because, and I'm sure you guys do too, I hear almost on a daily basis from men who are living with the agony of false accusations. And I heard just recently, last week, from a high-level surgeon, and I won't go into any details because he's going through the hell right now. He's a high-level surgeon. He's devoted his whole life to being the best he could be. And he wrote me this couple of heartbreaking emails talking about how he has sacrificed time he could have spent with his family, just, casual time to do all sorts of things above and beyond what he actually has to do as a surgeon, doing extra workshops in his workplace to, improve patient care and all sorts of things. He's been accused of sexual harassment, which in some ways is almost worse, I think, in that there's no forensic evidence at all ever. So he can never prove himself innocent in this case. And it's sexual harassment of what most normal human beings would say pretty trivial. Not even touching comments supposedly that he made that made these two junior assistants uncomfortable. And this has turned into this huge thing that could wreck his entire career. There's a board has been struck to investigate the allegations. And he's expected to go on with what is already a very high stress life. He performs microsurgery on tumors and all sorts of things. He can't be stressed. And yet he's supposed to go on month after month, maintaining his career and all of his commitment to his patients and going on as a family man. He's got kids at home and everything. And meanwhile, he knows these two accusers, even if the best case scenario is that it's found there isn't enough evidence to make any, take any disciplinary action against him. They don't live with the stress of being found to have been false accusers. It'll just be said that they misinterpreted, or sorry, there isn't enough evidence to proceed. So for them, it's a no-lose situation. For him, it's a no-win situation. He hopes that he won't lose his career. And he was saying to me that this strikes at the core of who he is, as a man, all the things he felt he has done for his community. He said he never became a surgeon because of the money. He always had the sense that he was doing genuine good. He saved so many people's lives, allowed people to see, removed tumors, done all this stuff. And None of that is taken into account in any way. If he is found guilty and his career is destroyed, these two assistants can in no way replace him in terms of the massive good that he does and hopefully will continue to do for his community. And yet none of that, of course, is taken into account. And what he's accused of doing is so minor, it made people feel uncomfortable, supposedly, by comments that he says he didn't make. They've been taken completely out of context or exaggerated or simply falsified. It sounds as if these two women just don't really like him. And yet this is taken seriously.
That's all it takes.
Yeah, that's all it takes. And the psychological toll on him. And he said that, he's spoken to other doctors that he works with, and they said that what they've chosen consciously to do to deal with the incredible stress, and I think so many doctors and men in positions like that, they are just sitting ducks for these kinds of allegations. And a lot of them have just said they because the stress is so great, not only the stress of dealing with an accusation if it comes, but just knowing that one could come at any time, that they all have decided to detach from what they're doing and to stop caring so much, and to make as one of their main focuses protecting themselves both materially and psychologically. The cost to them as individuals, meaning that of course they get much less satisfaction out of what they're doing, and then the cost to society of having a group of professionals who feel so insecure and know that everything they've worked for can be taken away at any minute. The cost to society of their disengagement and their cynicism and their defensiveness and their deep anger. I don't even think we can begin to calculate how much damage this is doing to us all. And often on the basis of things that could really never be determined and don't actually matter very much anyway.
Exactly.
That's how we ended up with Mike Pence rules, where he won't be alone with the woman, and why we have a trend now of male managers refusing to hire women on the job. This is impacting women in a very negative way, and I forecast that it will only worsen in the future as more awareness spreads of this problem. One of the things that I wanted to bring up in this is that false accusations, as you alluded to, Janice, are not just limited to those of a sexual variety. There's false accusations of domestic violence. I have worked with men seriously who, a divorce gets initiated and they call their families looking for support. And the father says, "How could you be such a bastard? She just told me what you did."
Oh.
And instantly, their own families, the nuclear family that they were raised with, the only real place that they have for support during a time like that, turns on them on an instant and sticks a knife in their back and twists it as easy as saying, "Pass the butter."
Yeah.
And when it comes down to it, and again, I don't take any pleasure in saying this, but it's the truth. I know very few men in my life. I'm 62, and I've known almost no men in my life who have not been impacted negatively in one way or another over a woman's pointed, crooked finger. And because all you have to do is say, "He was mean to me."
Yeah.
Or he didn't give me what I wanted. He didn't take care of me. He wasn't a perfect husband. He wasn't as though any of us are. And that alone is enough to uproot and twist up a family of origin into an absolute mess where people do get suicidal. It's no wonder that during breakups that men are 11 times more likely to kill themselves than women. It's only 4-to-1 or 5-to-1 during regular times, but during divorce and breakup, the suicide rate is 11 times for men what it is for women. And a lot of that I attribute, of course, the feminist theory on that. Well, of course, men don't share their feelings. And they isolate themselves. Well, hell yes, they do. Because the world turns on men when they go through a divorce. The whole world, their jobs, their families, everybody, even their closest male friends. When they're blue pill, well, what'd you do wrong?
Absolutely. And it's so crazy for men who are falsely accused, because, you know, the first reaction men get when they're falsely accused is, this is not going to be a problem. You know, this is going to be something where I'll just go and tell the police what really happened, and then it'll be over. And then slowly they start to realize, oh shit, they're not believing a word I'm saying. They think I'm the criminal. And it's like, it's a complete turnaround of his world. It just turns into chaos. It doesn't make any sense. And then you pile on top of that people don't support him, that people automatically think he's the problem. And this is tough. This is a big, big mess.
This is why I tell men all the time, and I say it now because of the topic we're talking about. When you go through a breakup with a woman, you better protect yourself. You better get the naivete out of your life, out of your head. Quit with the Pollyannish bullshit about how if I'm just really nice to her, she'll be nice to me in return. I'm not saying be mean to her at all, but I'm saying record your ass off. Document everything. Trust no one. Don't trust your lawyer. Don't trust her. Don't trust her family. And I hate to have to say this, but the fact of the matter is that any trust you put into that situation will be exploited and used against you.
Yes, and men must take care of themselves. Men have to take care of themselves, because there ain't nobody out there who's going to do it for them. You know?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the cold reality.
That is exactly right. So find red pill friends. You know, they will help you. You know, they'll stand with you. They understand what's going on. Very few other people will ever get it, you know.
And it's never ending. You know, I mean, my dad was accused of not sexual harassment, but harassment, just general bullying of a secretary, where he had worked as a volunteer on the board of directors of a credit union for about 35 years. And he'd been on the board of directors. He eventually was vice president and then president of the board for many, many years, worked with all sorts of secretaries. And then this one woman said that he had bullied her and raised his voice to her. I mean, you know, and yeah, like, what can you say to that? Too bad. So work it out with him. Let's sit down and have a conversation about it. And of course, nobody had heard it. There was no evidence. And yet it became this, you know, huge thing. My dad was grilled and questioned. They brought in a HR lawyer, and it was, you know, there was no evidence either way, but the lawyer found that the woman's story was more credible than my dad's, I'm sure, flustered, angry denials. And so he was forced to resign from this board that he'd served on, you know, for decades and decades. That you know, had been one of the things he most loved. That he poured all of his recreational time really into this credit union, because he really believed in the credit union concept. And yeah, and you know, and at first he had exactly that reaction. He just figured this was a minor thing that anybody could see listening, even if they believed the woman entirely, was trivial, and couldn't in any way outweigh, you know, his record of service and of friendly, respectful dealings with dozens and dozens and dozens of people. But it did outweigh all of that, and nobody stood up for him, or very, very, very few people that he expected to have his back didn't, because of course they don't want to be accused. Right. And yeah, it was, and this was, you know, he was 84 years old when this happened. So, you know, and that was one of the final things that happened to him at the end of his life, a life like many men's of service and achievement, and just being a fine, upstanding person. He died a couple years later. And yeah, it's just, I mean, I don't, there's no answer to it, obviously. I would like to say, come on, men and women, you know, let's support people who are accused.
There is one answer to it, and that is, you know, in the couples therapy I've done, I see it over and over and over again. The woman will come in and she says, he yells at me. He yells at me. I said, okay, tell me, you know, how does he yell? What does he do? And she talks loudly, right? And he's sitting there going, and I say, well, it seems to me like he's just raising his voice up to a louder level. He's not really yelling. He's yelling. And so I explained to them that guys, when they're talking with other guys, many times will raise their voice in order to make a point or whatever, and that women will interpret that as if they're yelling when really they're not. Guys are not yelling. They're trying to emphasize something. And it's just men and women have very different sensitivity gauges as far as what yelling is. And women are so sensitive to it that a lot of times, like your father, he was probably emphasizing some point which made her feel vulnerable or offended. And I'm telling you, as our culture, we've got to start teaching people how to be offended, because if we can't do that, we're sunk. It's okay to be offended. What?
We're doing just the opposite.
Exactly, Paul. We're daggone pathologizing being offended. And being offended is something that is good. You be offended? Yeah, I'm offended. Fucking am offended. And that's okay. That's part of what living life is with other people.
Yeah.
But when you're so sensitive that someone can't raise their voice when they're talking like I am right now, and that's considered yelling, we're screwed.
Well, and there's another side to that too.
What's that?
That I've experienced with couples work and also working with individual men, that there's sort of a dance between men and women in conflict. And one of the games of many is, let me be irrational and difficult for you until you're frustrated and you raise your voice and then say, aha, look, you're the problem.
Yes.
This happens to men over and over again in relationships. Yes. Look, you've got an anger issue. Well, wait a minute. I was just pissed off because I couldn't reason with you.
Yes.
But therapists in the blue pill world will take that scenario, not call the woman on what's going on, tell the man he's got an anger problem, and the only thing and one of sort of my red pill awakening was in undergrad days watching through glass at therapy. I got to observe one male therapist, and the woman was doing all these things and saying, he stays angry. He's angry at me all the time. And her voice was escalated. And finally, the therapist turns to her and says, well, you got him to yell at you.
Yeah.
What do you want to do with it? And I was just dead shocked.
Yeah.
Because the woman in training next to me gasped like this guy had just slapped her.
Right.
And she was beyond reaching at that point. She was not going to learn from him or anything. But I mean, this sort of plays into the professional aspect of it.
I've seen this hundreds of times. And what men need to learn is don't take the bait. Don't take the bait, because that's what it is. It's bait for you to get upset. And as soon as you're upset, it turns into you're the problem. See what an asshole you are? So don't take the bait, keep smiling, or leave, withdraw, pull out. But don't take the bait, because that's just what she's trying to do,
It's a frustrating world for men.
It's dangerous, man. It's dangerous. And you've got to be careful out there. The other thing we haven't talked about is the reasons people falsely accuse. I think that's an important piece. And, Kanan, the researcher who many people try and debunk, he came up with 3 reasons that people falsely accuse. One was an alibi. One was for
revenge.
Revenge. And the other was for gaining attention.
Yep.
And all 3 of those I think are good, but I think we need to add one in today's world. And that is victimhood. I think people now falsely accuse in order to bring their victim status up. And
Wouldn't that fall under attention?
I think it's a different kind of attention. I think the attention Kanan was talking about was more, oh, poor me, kind of, I've been hurt, and oh, can't you take care of me, kind of thing. This is very different. This is a political move to try and gain power.
It works too,
and it does work, and it's bizarre, and so it's so easy. Like Janice pointed out before, it's so easy to do. Of course, people are going to fall into that trap of just using it. Victimhood. Oh, goody. And the men are, again, the brunt of the problem. They take it.
I mean, I wouldn't even put it outside the realm of possibility that it's actually a tool of political power in the sense of literally getting men out of positions of power.
Yes.
I can't think of a really good case now, but there's a case that you guys probably heard about too. Last summer, it broke. It was a highly regarded geneticist, a man named, his last name was Ayala, and he was at the University of California, Irvine. They booted him out of the university. They're even removing his name from 2 buildings and many other scholarships and programs. He contributed $10 million of his own money to the University of California at Irvine because he loved it so much. His whole life in the university, and he was a prize-winning biologist. And at age 84, same age as my dad, he was forced to step away. He wasn't allowed to participate in any more university events. He was publicly disgraced. He wasn't given the title of emeritus, which is the honorific that you gain after you retire from university. His transgression was that he lavishly complimented women. And you know, I think most people would agree that some of what he was reported to have said, if he really said it, was beyond the pale. But they were things like, you know, you can sit in my lap to give your presentation if you want.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he told the pregnant woman, "You're huge." He constantly told women that they were beautiful. He practiced the European custom of kissing on both cheeks. He told one woman, "I've just been told," he was given many warnings, you know, that he should stop this terrible behavior. He told one woman, "I've just been told that women don't like to be told they're beautiful, but I'm sure you don't agree," and then told her she was beautiful.
Roll out the IV Thorazine.
She reported to the investigative committee that she because he was such a powerful man, she didn't feel she could tell him that she didn't like it. And this is what we hear over and over again from all these colleagues, many of them professors, some of them graduate students and staff. Because he was powerful, they didn't feel they could tell him that they didn't like to be told they were beautiful. So, you know, the man's entire career, everything, he's disgraced out of something that in a sane world would never get to that position. And, you know, and almost no one defended him or stepped up to say that the punishment was far in excess of the so-called crime, if it is a crime at all. So, yeah, so there's sort of 2 problems, it seems. One is our knee-jerk sense of compassion for any woman who claims any kind of victimhood, no matter how trivial or no matter how completely unfounded. And the other, the suspicion, the miasma, the sort of black cloud that seems to collect around the man who's been accused.
Yes.
And on both of them, I don't know what, but do you guys have any words of advice for how men can resist the self-doubt, the self-hatred, the despair that must come on?
One thing, I've got some, but before I get into that, I wanted to point out, you said this, Janice, is a political weapon. There's no better case than Dominique Strauss-Kahn, who was accused. He was the president of the International Monetary Fund. He was in line to run for president of France. This was a guy with a brilliant political future. Then he was falsely accused by a maid named Danmel Indagne, and ended up, his political career was destroyed. And I have no doubt there were other forces at work in this, people that did not want him to become president of France. But at any rate, yes, I've got there's a lot to say to men who get in this position. And the first thing has to be, but this is what's more important to men, is accountability and what they can actually do, is rid yourself of the naivete. If you get any wind that somebody has made a false accusation against you, if you hear about it from your family or one of your friends, that somebody even says something like you were mean to them, Never be alone with that individual again. Do whatever you have to do. I don't care what it is. No limits. Do not be alone with them. Men have this, and I've seen them go through this in family courts and in divorces, and they go into this. And what Tom was talking about, this won't be a problem. I'll just tell my side of the story, and truth and justice and the American way always wins out in the end. And I know that I'm in the right, and I know that reasonable people will listen to me. No, they will not listen to you. They will have your words go in one ear, out the other, and then they'll smash the gavel down and throw you in jail. That's what will happen. And if you don't rid yourself, if you don't disabuse yourself of the notion that you're against a totally rigged system, then you're even more vulnerable. And so for me, job one is to, get the naive little boy out of the way and start dealing with this like you're dealing with a stinging insect.
Yeah, I would add one thing to that, Paul, and that would be that, in the blue pill world, a man's worth is based on his status and what he does. And I think as men move towards a red pill world, they have to start thinking of their status as being their own worth. Their worth in being human, their worth in being men, not their worth in what they've done. And we need to help men start cultivating that understanding that they are worthwhile just in being themselves. It may sound a little corny, but it's so true. And this is what gets completely toppled in the blue pill world, is your status gets toppled, with a false accusation. But they can't topple someone's feeling that they are worthy just for being themselves. They can't topple that.
Call it corny if you want to, but I guarantee you that a lot of the men that kill themselves in these situations, that's part of the driving force behind it, is that they have no place left in the world where they feel like they're of value.
Yes, exactly. And they have value just in themselves, Anyway, are we about there?
Yeah.
I think we are. This is a really bitch of a problem.
Yes, it is.
It's terribly difficult. Terribly complicated. There's no easy answers. If you get falsely accused, you're in trouble.
Yep. Real trouble.
There's no style of life. I mean, you can reduce risk. You can do things like some men have opted not to get married. Some men have opted to do things like abide by Mike Pence rules and never be alone with women that they don't know very, very well. And some men have opted not to be alone with women, period. I mean, there's things you can do, and none of those are the greatest answers in the world. I mean, you have to isolate yourself to be safe. That is really kind of crazy, but that's the world we live in. But I think what Tom said is really, really important, is that we need to reach out to boys and start telling them that they're worth more than what they do.
Yes. Yes.
And tell them, in fact, that the world will lie about them, about their nature. They will grow up with false messages of who and what they are, and start teaching them from a young age to reject those messages and to find their path to self-actualization within and outside of group consensus, as difficult as that is. Because without some sort of group consensus, self-actualization is a very difficult thing to achieve. I mean, that's part of Maslow's hierarchy, with social affiliation and feeling loved. And I can see where you're probably not going to get there without that. But that's where I think red pill communities, things like, let me shamelessly drop a plug for the International Conference on Men's Issues coming up in August of this year in Chicago. Because one of the things you get there, you will not walk around one of those conferences feeling like an outsider. You may go there if you've never been to one and feel like an insider for the first time in a long time.
Indeed.
Because that's what these things do. And that's another bit of advice I have for men, is to, we're a small community, but we're open, and get connected to us.
Yes.
And
we'll all be there.
We're all welcome. Yeah.
We'll all be there, and we're looking forward to doing that and being with everybody. So
there's links to tickets below if you want to attend. There's also a link to a funder, and I'm going to plug this for Anthony Corniche. he is the guy that, he wasn't at the first ICMI, but at every one after that, he's the guy that shows up and makes videos of all the talks. And he works on this, I mean, works on it like a dog. And he does it mostly by himself. He travels the world, sets up all of his fancy video equipment, does the whole thing, and does all the post-production work so that we can share these talks with the world for free for people who can't make it.
Yeah.
And so there's a link below on my channel to his GoFundMe. He's almost halfway toward his goal of 1,500 pounds. He's from the UK. And I contributed to it, and I urge everybody to throw a little change in that tip jar to help defray the cost, the expense that Anthony goes through every year doing these conferences.
Yep, it's to everyone's advantage that he does this too. So chip in a buck or two and see where it goes. But Paul, we haven't done the awards yet.
Oh, we can't get out of here without.
I know.
I mean, we have a puta to recognize.
Oh, but who's first? First comes the award, right?
Yeah, the humanitarian award. And
we know where that goes.
yes, that goes to Vladek Filler. And let me say something about Vladek here. He's somebody I know. I've had, matter of fact, during his ordeal, Paul Kavanaugh, one of the assistant DAs in the Bar Harbor prosecutor's office, appealed to the judge to get a voice from men to quit posting about all this legal stuff. And he was told pretty summarily by the judge to, thicken your skin a little bit. I can't tell somebody not to report on a rape trial.
Really?
So this is the kind of people that we're dealing with. These are the kind of people that Vladek had in his face for 12 years. And they did get him locked up for 3 weeks. And they charged him with rape and tried him twice. He never blinked. He never backed down. He stood there like that guy in Tiananmen Square in front of the tank, literally stood there like that for 12 years with his finger extended, saying, I'm not going to be beat by this. As an example to other men who say, well, I can't hurt her feelings. I can't fight this. I can't go public. I can't do this. I can't do that because they're out to get me. You know something? He's somebody to look at, emulating, because he is the last person, excuse me, on this planet that I would want angry at me.
Yes. So he gets the award.
He does get the humanitarian award, and he deserves it righteously.
And the Puda?
Mary Kellett.
Oh, Mary.
Disgraced former prosecutor at the Bar Harbor prosecutor's office. Uh-oh, there goes that bitch. Mary Kellett.
Mary.
Now practicing law at a strip mall near you, thanks to Vladek Filler. She deserves the Flying Puta Award.
Oh, man, really?
And there was, Carletta Barsano, Linda Gleason, the nurse that coached Lygia Filler into All the Lies. I mean, we had a choice of a lot of putas in this one, but Mary Kellett for leading the charge against Vladek Filler and even not stopping her attempts to legally harass and terrorize him after she was publicly caught doing what she was doing. She definitely deserves recognition for that.
Yeah.
All under the cover of being legal,
Yeah.
Justice. Ay, ay, ay.
Yeah.
Go, Vladek.
Yeah. Truth, justice, the American way.
And false accusation.
Yeah. If you didn't do anything wrong, you don't have anything to worry about.
Right.
And other platitudes.
Are we finished?
I think we're finished.
All right. That's good.
Thanks, guys.
Men are good.
They are good.
And we'll see you guys next time. Y'all take care. Let's see if I can turn this
Take care.
thing off.